Until the end of World War II, there were very few men formally enrolled at the school. This was to change drastically with the establishment of the GI Bill in 1944. The presence of large and growing numbers of veterans was to have a decisive and profound impact on the institution. Some alumni returned to their alma mater after military service. Malcolm Keddy, a 1941 graduate and veteran of the Italian campaign, came to the English department after graduate school. Margaret Chickering, alumna class of 1933, joined the Women's Army Corps.
When the World War II was starting and patriotism was very strong, I thought, maybe I could do something to help.
In 3 years, Margaret went from private citizen to captain, a remarkable achievement. After graduate school at Columbia, Margaret returned to Keene in the late 1950s to join the faculty in the education and home economics programs, retiring in 1970. It was the veterans who aided the college in making the transition to a modern institution. Joe Oakey, like many vets, was older than the traditional students, was married, and found himself in a teacher's college on the GI Bill.
I went to a meeting of the student council, and the way things ran was very much like a high school. The advisors ran things, and the kids carried it out.
The rose ceremony at graduation was an early victim of the vets' influence on campus culture.
I had several veterans who said, if I have to march in that march with a rose in my hand, I'm not going to graduate.
Joe Oakey joined the student council, campaigned against the curfew, and with Vinnie Russell and Don Averill and others, started the school newspaper.
We put out a tabloid newspaper. They used to put out kind of fancy things that were literary type magazines, and we wanted a newspaper. And Don and I thought this up together, and sitting in my room in Camp House, and we just went out and picked up people, got a guy named Charlie Mitchell to be in charge of advertising. We brought Joe Oakley in as a city editor or something. I think we gave him an editor's title. Basically, Joe and Don and I ran the paper.
Paying the cost themselves, they named the paper the Monadnock.
That was a big surprise when that paper hit the campus, and Dr. Young was elated.
It was the April Fool's issue in 1950, however, that got everyone's attention.
In the April Fool's edition, we had a communist cell discovered in Hale Building, in the wine cellars of Hale Building, and we put Mabel Brown as the cell leader of the cell. And Dr. Young had, when he was so pleased with our paper that he was sending copies to all the state legislators. This was during the McCarthy era. And he called Don and I in and he says, you know, boys, you've got me in a bit of a pickle here. I said, well, it's an April Fool's edition, Dr. Young. He says, well, I know that, you know that, but the state legislators are calling me up and saying, what the hell is going on down there at your college?
Dr. Young was interrogated by members of the legislature. This was taken seriously in a state where state employees were obliged to sign a loyalty oath until the early 1970s.
There's something about starting something from nothing and not having the college backing you up. We did it on our own.
David Staples entered KTC in the fall of 1948. When the Korean conflict broke out, he quit college to join the service. Within months, he found himself on the front lines.
I became a chaplain's assistant, and we would go to all these emplacements right on the main line of resistance, and we'd be no more than maybe 2,000 yards from the enemy, and that was very dangerous. and sometimes mortar shells would come in on us. They would see the gathering, and we would retreat down into the bunkers. And I remember one time going across a camouflage bridge to get to one of our outposts when we could see the puffs of smoke of the mortar shells coming up behind our Jeep. Davey says, he said, "Turn around, Dave, and get out of here." And I did. I don't know how I got around we were on a bridge, and I put my foot on that gas pedal. We got out of there. The very next day, the Catholic chaplain had a shell land right next to him, and the driver lost his right arm, and the chaplain was killed. So I figured I was pretty lucky.
David returned in 1953 on the GI Bill. He was one of the many Korean War vets to come to KTC and was to graduate 2 years later.
I don't know. Again, I've said it many times. Without Keene, I probably would have been nothing. You know, I never would have achieved the things I've achieved.
In the spring of 1957, several students were suspended for breaking dormitory regulations. The students responded by protesting and making up a list of 28 grievances. Most of the grievances dealt with the need for more faculty, better facilities, proper maintenance, and such issues as transfer credit. Dr. Young and the Commissioner of Education, Austin J. McCaffrey, found many of the issues so reasonable that they agreed to many of the changes requested. For the first time, students had taken to the streets to affect policy. There was no turning back. In spite of resistance from some faculty against the growing autonomy of the student body, and the appearance of an Ozzie and Harriet atmosphere during much of the 1950s, it was clear that the days of the rose ceremony were over.